and we'll be underway soon. If you're just joining us, we're giving neighbors about 30 more seconds to jump in before we get started. As we wait for more neighbors to come in, feel free to use the chat and let us know where in the ward you're calling in from. All right, I'm going to kick us off for the sake of time, and we have many great guests with us, and I want to make sure we have enough time to get to everyone. Before we jump in, I want to frame, as I often do, the purpose of these monthly calls, which is to provide a platform for neighbors to learn about the many efforts underway to keep district residents and Ward 5 neighbors safe, as well as to provide a platform for neighbors to ask questions and to get more information around specific incidents related to their concerns or their community. I've been hosting these public safety calls, and it really came out of an organic need that I saw as I was traveling across our community and having more conversations with neighbors, that there was a void of a central place for finding information and convening critical stakeholders. And so that's why I'm excited for this month's call. We have several important guests. I'm excited to have the executive director of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, Christy Love. They provide tons of information and coordination efforts, some of which you may have heard as it relates to our Secure DC legislation that is before the council. And I'm excited to have Christy here to share more about the Coordinating Council. We have a representative, Candace Catalan, from the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. There is no other way that we're going to reduce violence in the district than getting a hand around gun violence that is plaguing the district. I'm excited to say that in 5D, which covers the largest swath of Ward 5, violence is on the decline as it is district-wide. But we're seeing more violent incidents involving a gun. And we know how critically important it is for us to curb gun violence here in our community and across the district. And so again, we're excited to have partners here from the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. We are also joined by Ms. Frances Penn from the 5D Citizens Advisory Council. Ms. Penn has been a staunch advocate for our public safety apparatus, in particular MPD, and we're excited to join forces and have Ms. Penn as part of today's efforts. She will provide very brief remarks before we turn to our MPD partners in an effort to connect the dots between the work of our Citizens Advisory Council and the updates that will come from MPD. We will be joined today by 5D Captain Moore. No, I'm sorry. We will be joined by 3D Captain Moore to share about the work underway in Ward 5's 3rd District. And to answer any questions that neighbors may have. We will also be joined, I believe, by a representative from the 5th District, as our commander is not feeling well today, and so he will be unable to join. And so that concludes our guests for this month. We are constantly trying to change out who shares on these monthly calls. A few housekeeping rules before we move forward. We would ask that you use the chat to enter any questions that you have. You can also use the Q&A function built in the Zoom. We will have a member of my team, Oliver Stout, who's one of our constituent services coordinators, to help facilitate the conversation. And that is how we will navigate to just make sure we're the most efficient with using the Zoom features. And as always, if we run out of time and aren't able to get to your question, we will follow up accordingly. Lastly, before we turn it over to our guests, I want to provide some Ward 5 relevant and council updates. As I mentioned at the outset, I'm excited to say that we are seeing violent crime trending downward across the district, as well as across many parts of Ward 5. I want to thank our many partners, including MPD, who are working tirelessly to address resident concerns. We have been working across district agencies, including DDOT, to adjust lighting in different neighborhoods, the Department of Buildings to address vacant and blighted properties. We are working with DPW to efficiently remove vehicles from communities like Fort Lincoln and others. And it truly is a whole of government approach. Again, this call monthly is an effort for me and district representatives to update the many neighbors about all that is happening around the clock to keep neighbors safe. Also, as you all are well aware, the council is poised to take its second vote on the Secure DC legislation at Tuesday's legislative meeting. I am confident that the legislation will pass. It passed on first vote unanimously, and I am assuming it will pass again unanimously. This legislation needs to be funded, although there are parts that can be enacted immediately. And so what I anticipate is that there will be some measures passed through an emergency basis. As you know, via the council's rules, emergency legislation cannot have a cost. And so those measures that don't have a cost will be implemented immediately. Others will be implemented pending funding. So one of the things that I will be advocating for the mayor to do is to fully fund all of the public safety legislation that has come before and passed the council. And the last thing I will say is there's been much discussion about the Office of Unified Communication at a recent oversight hearing. I continue to elevate concerns of neighbors who repeatedly say I call into 911 and I'm either put on hold or I'm not getting my call answered. I'm happy to say that we are seeing staffing numbers increase at the Office of Unified Communication. And I am continuing to follow up on more recent events pertaining to the office's transition of PowerPhone. Everyone may not be in the weeds of what that means, but all that to say that I am paying very close attention to the functions of our 911 agency, as I believe it is critical to keeping our residents safe. I look forward to sharing more information with neighbors about what all of that entails, but I too will be asking the mayor to increase the salary of individuals at the Office of Unified Communication. I was dismayed to learn at a recent oversight hearing that call takers are making $40,000. And I don't have to tell you, it is very hard to live in the District of Columbia with a salary of $40,000. And I'm of the mind that we should be compensating 911 call takers and dispatchers as the critical frontline workers that they are. So again, I want to thank you all for joining us. I also want to thank our many partners who are joining us. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Christy Love, the Executive Director of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council.
All right. Good afternoon. Can you see me and hear me?
We could certainly hear you, and my team just spotlighted you. So,
all right. There we go. Well, first of all, thank you so much to Councilmember Parker. I appreciate the invitation to be here today and talk just a bit about the work of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. And I think your team is going to be able to share just a few slides that I've prepared to
Yep.
help guide me through.
So as you talk, we'll click through. Feel free to just yell out and let us know when you're ready to go to the next slide.
Okay, that sounds great. While those are coming up, again, I'm Chrissy Love, so the Executive Director for the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. I was appointed to this position last May, and prior to that, I had served as the interim director, and then for 5 years as the Deputy Executive Director, and joined the team in 2017. And you can go ahead to the next slide. I fully recognize that the CJCC may not be one of the better known agencies in the district, so I do just want to take a few moments to share a bit about what we do. Many of you on the call may realize that the district has a very unique criminal justice system, and the reason for that is because we are not yet a state. And we do fall under congressional and federal jurisdiction in many ways. And there was a law that was passed in the late 90s called the Revitalization Act. And what that act did is actually transferred many of the district's criminal justice functions from the district to the federal government. There are a couple of reasons why that happened. I think at that point in time, the district was facing some financial challenges. And so that was one of the congressional remedies to that was it would take on a good portion of our criminal justice system to alleviate those financial burdens. But what that did is created this hybrid system where we have some parts of our system that are under the mayor's authority or something like the Office of the Attorney General, which is an independent agency that we as the residents of the district elect the Attorney General. And then most of our system is actually comprised of federal agencies. So there's no one chain of command, so to speak, or no one person that can sort of, say, we're going to do this, and everyone sort of falls into place. So Congress, I think, recognizing that they created this very unique system, had the Government Accountability Office do an assessment of the district's criminal justice system to identify what's going well, what are challenges. One of the great challenges was coordination and information sharing. The GAO recommended that the district establish a criminal justice coordinating council to bring all of the federal and local criminal justice and public agencies to the same table so that we could do a couple of things. First, identify what the challenges are, generate solutions, all for the sake of public safety, and to ensure that our city has a fair system of justice. So the CJCC, we're a small independent agency. By independent, that means we don't fall under the administrative authority of the mayor. That said, the mayor does serve as the chair of our council. We're an agency that works on behalf of a council. We serve that council and we serve the district, I say, in 4 ways. We have 4 core functions. We facilitate automated information sharing. So in total, there are about 30 plus criminal justice and public safety agencies, federal and local, that have jurisdiction here in the District of Columbia. We, as the CJCC, facilitate information sharing among those agencies by connecting their records management systems. So we allow for real-time information sharing among federal and local public safety and criminal justice agencies here in the district. The second thing we do is conduct research and analysis. We're the home of the district's Statistical Analysis Center. There are SACs all across the country. We receive some support and technical assistance from the Department of Justice, but really our role is to monitor the criminal justice and public safety trends here in the district. The third thing we do is facilitate interagency collaboration. And at any point in time, we have about 15 working groups and committees. A number of those groups are to help govern that system I talked about, where that we are helping to exchange data. And then the other work groups and committees are really across 4 priority areas that our members have identified. Those are violent crime, which is top of mind for many of us as district residents, juvenile justice, corrections and reentry, and substance abuse and mental health. And then the last thing we do is provide training and technical assistance. We host webinars, we host public meetings. I'll share a little bit more about an upcoming public meeting. So that is who we are, what we do. I'm not going to read through this entire list of committees and work groups, but I just wanted to offer that as a visual to give you a flavor of what the CJCC does. We can go to the next slide. So I mentioned that we have the Statistical Analysis Center that conducts a lot of research and analysis to monitor criminal justice trends and public safety trends. And per recent council legislation that Councilmember Parker just mentioned, the emergency and temporary legislation that was passed last year, and that would be made permanent in the Secure DC bill, states that CJCC on a monthly basis would have to publish data on violent crime incidents and arrests. And then on a quarterly basis, we would provide data on pretty much each phase of both the criminal and juvenile justice systems. So our deadline to get those first reports up, and we've done the reports in the form of a dashboard. We thought that would be a little easier for the public to navigate. The first set of dashboards were published on December 1st. I've provided the website here. It's DCJSAT. It's the Justice Statistical Analysis Tool. You can head on over to where it says new public safety and justice reports, and you'll find those dashboards. Something we have done, which actually the legislation required, is that for the crime data, we make it so that you can sort the crime data by ward, even at the neighborhood level. We have neighborhood clusters, police service areas. And so if you can go in this dashboard, the crime dashboard specifically, you can select Ward 5, and you can see the crime statistics for Ward 5 going back as far as 2018. You can compare them year to date. You can compare the full calendar year. You can identify your specific neighborhood or neighborhood cluster to see what the violent crime levels are there. So we hope that it's a useful tool for you. The other thing that we've recently made publicly available, it's called the Gun Violence Problem Analysis. And so what is that? The purpose of the GVPA is to really identify the key drivers of gun violence here in the district. So this isn't something that we did entirely on our own. We engaged a subject matter expert to help us with this, called the National Institute of Criminal Justice Reform, or NICJR. And so they came in, worked with our Statistical Analysis Center team, also worked with MPD, Office of Gun Violence Prevention. And we all worked collaboratively to collect data and also do some interviews to really get a sense of what's going on with respect to gun violence in the district. And so NICJR pulled information on all of the non-fatal shootings from 2021 and 2022, and then all of the homicides, non-fatal shootings from 2022 and all the homicides from 2021 and 2022. They looked at who all the victims were and who all the suspects were, determined what their demographic information was, as well as their criminal histories. So it turns out that demographically, we are seeing that both victims and suspects look very similar demographically. It's predominantly Black males between the ages of 18 to 34. And I think what's a little concerning is this is the second time that we've done this analysis with NICJR. And we've been talking a lot about young people. So the first time we did the analysis, I would say about 10% of victims and suspects were juveniles, those under the age of 18. This time around, when we looked at the non-fatal shooting suspects, so that's where shootings, but the victim survived, 25% of the suspects for juveniles. So that's a pretty steep increase in just a 2-year time period. We went from about 10% to 25% of the non-fatal shooting suspects being juveniles. So that's definitely something we're keeping our eye on. This analysis also looked at motives for shootings. So in terms of motives, what we saw were personal disputes. These are just interpersonal disputes where someone gets upset, they have a gun available on them, and they decide to end their conflict, end their argument, end their dispute by shooting the person that they're in the argument with. The other next most frequent category was gang and crew related beefs. So we don't have traditional gangs so much here in the district, but we do have neighborhood crews who have decades-long histories of, beefs and conflicts. And so a number of the shootings, excuse me, a little under the weather, a number of the shootings we're seeing are because of those conflicts. We're also seeing some shootings with what's called instant disputes. So the personal dispute may have been lingering, what I talked about before, but the instant dispute is something that pops off in the moment. We can even see people who would consider themselves friends end up in this type of dispute. And like I said, they resolve it with a gun. And then lastly, we're seeing some increases in drug markets here in the district and drug territories and beefs associated with those, as well as some robberies and some carjackings that have resulted in shootings as well. I will say in terms of recommendations, and actually we can go ahead to the next slide and I'll just kind of combine my discussion about the two recommendations. So also mentioned this was the second time we did this problem analysis. The first time around, in addition to doing the analysis, we said, NICJR, can you also help us with coming up with some recommendations for what the district can do to reduce violent crime? Why did we ask NICJR to do that? A couple of reasons. So the White House and President Biden has certainly identified reducing violent crime as a priority, and actually identified 4 organizations that do this work nationwide and have had success. So NICJR was one of 4 training and technical assistance providers identified by the White House to support U.S. cities in reducing gun violence. And so we were able to, contract with them. They've worked in many cities across the country, maybe most notably Oakland, California, which had a lot of success, more recently Indianapolis and Baltimore, Philadelphia, Newark, and New Jersey, and Memphis. So just all across the country. So we got someone who's had experience, had success in other cities. They made a number of recommendations, about 16 total. And so I just wanted to highlight a few here. The recommendations are broken down into prevention. So to me, prevention is probably more so our youth, those who have not yet engaged in criminal activity. Intervention would be working with people who have been involved in criminal activity and you're trying to get them to stop. And then we have community transformation. So in terms of prevention, this is really about trying to figure out who are our high-risk youth. And then once we identify them, we have to prioritize them for intensive services and supports. There's some analysis that the CJCC is doing right now to try to figure out what are some factors we can use to identify our high-risk youth. We've done some of that analysis before. We're refining it specifically with respect to violent crime. Another recommendation was community resource hubs. I know the mayor just announced that there's a new community resource hub in Chinatown. Not to say that it's necessarily directly related to that, but it does seem promising because it seems very similar to one of these recommendations. With respect to intervention, and that's where I kind of want to spend my last few moments focusing on, the strategy, when I mentioned all of these other cities that have seemed to have success, the strategy that seems to have the greatest impact on reducing violent crime is what's called a group violence or gun violence reduction strategy. Some know it as focused deterrence. What is focused deterrence? It's essentially four things. You identify your highest risk individuals. I mentioned that we're trying to figure out risk factors for youth, but as part of the problem analysis that NICJR did for us, we did work with them to come up with just really being able to identify who are our highest risk folks that we're really concerned that they're either going to be a victim or a perpetrator of gun violence. Once you have identified them, you communicate to them, and that communication is usually done with collectively with law enforcement and a trusted community member, as well as a service provider, maybe a violence interrupter. You're going to them, you're letting them know, hey, we know kind of what you're involved in. You're at risk. We're concerned about you. We want you to live. We don't want you to be locked up. And so we are here and we're going to offer you help. But at the same time, you're offering them help. You also let them know that we are going to keep an eye on you. And if you decide to persist and continue in violent activity, we are going to take swift and certain action and remove you from the community. So once you've delivered that message, and it may take a couple of times delivering the message because this is a pretty challenging group to deal with, but you stay true to your word, you prioritize them for intensive services and supports. You assign them a life coach who's going to be in communication with them on a daily basis, talking to them, trying to keep them on the right track, taking them to appointments, helping them to make appointments, just walking alongside them. And if hopefully as a last resort, if they do, in spite of all the help and the offers you've made, if they do still persist in violent crime, you have to hold them accountable and make that arrest and make the prosecution. And like I said, hold them accountable for their crime. So that is the strategy that seems to have had the most impact across other cities that are seeing reductions in violent crime. And then I'll end with this last slide, and I'm happy to discuss any questions. We can go to the last one. And so I mentioned, in addition to the research and analysis we do training and technical assistance. And so this is a list of some recent events that we've had. We've covered housing for returning citizens. We've talked about alternatives to incarceration for youth, the relationship between neighborhood blight and violent crime. And that's actually a statistically significant relationship. Promising practices for diversion and community supervision for juveniles, the role of social media and gun violence. And then just going to put in a shameless plug here. Next week, we're actually having a public meeting. We're having it over in Ward 6 at Eastern Market, where we're going to talk about adult community supervision. And the reason we're doing this, when I talked to the members of the CJCC, we all thought it would be beneficial to just make sure, especially as the public's really been engaged. And I think the legislative process with respect to Secure DC, it's a lot of questions, a lot of public witnesses. And we're all concerned about violence. So the public is really engaged and wants to understand how the system works and potentially where there's room for improvement. And so we as the CJCC want to help enhance the public's understanding. So we're going to do this first community meeting that's going to focus on adult supervision. So that's pretrial, the Pretrial Services Agency, and also CSOSA, the Court Services and Offender Supervision Agency. Then we'll have a separate public meeting on juvenile community supervision. And we're also going to have a meeting that looks at juvenile prosecution as well. So that's the CJCC, some of the things that we've done with respect to violent crime, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Awesome. I really appreciated that overview and providing neighbors the opportunity to learn more about your work. We are going to lift up a couple of questions. Still feel free to send them in. We're going to, after asking a few questions, keep moving in the agenda, and then towards the end, also lift up the remaining questions. Executive Director Love, I see that soon you all will have dashboards related to the Attorney General and the USAO or the U.S. Attorney's Office papering decisions. Can you
Yes.
share more about those dashboards, when we might expect them? And I will say, and as I have said repeatedly, I continue to be concerned about the papering rates, particularly through our U.S. Attorney's Office. The fact that the public often does not receive information about why certain decisions or cases were not papered. I give the example most relevant recently, where 5D officers arrested an individual who was involved with 18 violent assaults and robberies, and the U.S. Attorney Office decided not to paper that individual. I believe it is important for the community to know in order to hold our U.S. Attorney accountable. It's also worth noting the U.S. Attorney is not accountable to D.C. residents, as they are, and that office is federally appointed. But Executive Director Love, can you share more about those dashboards, when we might expect them and what type of information we will see?
I can, and those dashboards are actually up. We posted them just a couple of weeks ago. I can just give you there may not be
Okay.
time for me to show it on the screen, but and so we have the data for the U.S. Attorney's Office, who, like you said, prosecutes adult crime for gun possession. So this is a case where someone's illegally carrying a gun. From January through October of last year, they papered about 64% of those cases, gun possession cases. And then when it comes to a violent crime committed with a gun, the U.S. Attorney's Office papered 88% of those cases. The rates are actually, we don't know why, the rates are flipped for the Office of the Attorney General for Juvenile. So juvenile papering rate for gun possession was about 88%. And then the juvenile papering rate for violent crime with gun was about 65% from OHE.
If you could share the link for those dashboards, and I think my
Sure.
team just dropped the general link in the chat.
Yep.
That is tremendously helpful information. Are there any explanations around the reasoning for papering or not papering cases?
So we've asked for it because that's analysis we would love to do. You know, just each case, just showing what are the most common reasons. Both USAO and OAG, instead of honestly, I'm not sure if their records management systems are structured that they can give us the breakdown for each type of case. So they just gave us generic reasons. Really is you know, maybe at the time they're making the charging decision, there's insufficient evidence, which is what we hear most often. And I want to give a specific example of that, if you let me. So we often hear maybe MPD will arrest someone for carjacking. And the case is presented to the U.S. Attorney's Office or the Office of the Attorney General. When they review the case, maybe they say, yes, the evidence is clear that the person was driving in a car that was not theirs. But we don't have clear evidence that the person actually physically got the car from the person. Like maybe there's no evidence of the carjacking incident, but there was evidence that the person is driving in a car that doesn't belong to them. So whereas MPD may have charged carjacking at arrest, by the time a case is papered, it may become an unauthorized use of a vehicle, UUV, which is a property crime and not a violent crime like carjacking. So that's some of the reasons that we see. Maybe the witnesses are no longer cooperating. Sometimes we hear what's called Fourth Amendment issues, which may be you know, improper search or seizure. But we do recognize the rules are kind of changing. The Court of Appeals will overturn previous decisions. So things that MPD, it used to be fine for them to do in terms of how they approached a particular search, with a new appellate decision, maybe it's no longer appropriate. So I don't want to give the impression that MPD is out here violating people's constitutional rights. We have to recognize that each time the Court of Appeals makes a decision, it can affect the way MPD does things, and the rules are changing frequently.
I appreciate that, and I find that you're maybe a bit more diplomatic than I am on some of this. I maintain that we need more information from our U.S. Attorney's Office in particular, but also the Attorney General's Office about why they are or are not papering certain cases. With that, Oliver, I would love for you to lift up one or two questions, and then we're going to turn it over to Ms. Frances Penn from the 5D Citizens Advisory Council. We'll go to our 5D team and our 3D team before moving forward in our agenda.
Okay, so we have a question from a neighbor. They asked, how can we include the everyday community member in reducing the violence in our neighborhood?
You know, that is I think that's a really helpful question. The example I gave of well, first of all, I should say, and I think I know the Office of Gun Violence Prevention is on here. They can talk about some of the grants that they've awarded to community members who have innovative ideas on how to reduce gun violence. So I think that's an excellent way. In terms of kind of the space we're looking at is when I mentioned that group violence reduction strategy, and so that communication to the high-risk person. In some other cities, they involve community members. They, you know, it could be a faith leader. It could just be, you know, well-respected, you know, OG from the neighborhood or whatever. And they include them in those call-ins because you're communicating to the person. We know you're doing risk behavior, but we care about you. We want to help you. We want you to live. We want you to be free and not locked up. And so the community has been part of those conversations. So I think if the district chooses to really try to implement, you know, this version of focused deterrence of the gun violence reduction strategy, that may be a space for a community to participate.
Okay. And one more question. As you did mention at the beginning of the presentation, you stated that a lot of neighbors are oblivious to what CJCC does. So we wanted to know, and with that being said, is there any resources that you recommend that neighbors should know about as far as public safety is concerned?
Yeah, I would say definitely the dashboards, and thank you so much for putting the link in the chat. Please take a look at those. I do think it's a wealth of information. I mean, if you want to know about kids on probation, you can go to the dashboard. I just talked about, we were fortunate to able to get the papering dashboards up. The disposition, so how does the case end? How many, you know, for violent crime cases, how many resulted in a finding of guilt? How many were dismissed? That data is there too. So that's certainly a big resource. And then, you know, if you have a moment, please do take a look at the gun violence problem analysis and also that strategic plan, all of which are on our website. So cjcc.dc.gov. And then if you want to be on our distribution list for our public meetings and webinars, you can email dccjcc@dc.gov. I know that was a lot. And then you can be on our distribution list and stay up to date with what we're doing.
Awesome. Executive Director Love, I would flag as I'm looking actively at the dashboard links, it says coming soon for the OAG and the USAO dashboards. Just flagging that at least on my end, I can't access it. And neighbors may run into the same issue. While I have you, and I promise in the last 30 seconds, we're going to switch gears. This is relevant to Security C. As you know, in the first vote, there was an amendment moved and passed that set a time limit for the expansion of pretrial detention and required the CJCC to produce an annual reporting around the effect and impact of expanded pretrial for adults and juveniles. There has been a question posed about the CJCC's capacity to produce said reporting, not to put you on the spot.
Mhm.
But if you want to weigh in here, as I imagine that very topic is going to be paramount to Tuesday's discussion.
Yes. So I will say their Secure DC and certainly everything that all of the public safety agencies have put into place, that the mayor has put in place, it would be really difficult to isolate the impact that pretrial detention, expanded pretrial detention, is having on public safety. So that's kind of from the research perspective. I don't envision us being able to do research that will say, yes, this is or isn't working to enhance public safety. What we can do is provide certain descriptive statistics. So we would be able to tell you what proportion of defendants were being detained prior to the legislation, what proportion are being detained, what proportion were being rearrested for new offenses previously, what proportion are being rearrested now. We can give this descriptive stats, but we're not going to be able to make a causal link.
Understand. Well, I hope you can hang out with us for a little bit in case we have more questions, but I want to thank you for joining us and for all the work that you do on behalf of the CJCC, a critical independent agency in our ecosystem.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Now, and I'll hang out certainly. Thanks so
Awesome.
much.
I want to switch gears to someone that needs no introduction, Ms. Frances Penn, who has long been an advocate for public safety in our communities. She heads up the 5th District Citizens Advisory Council, and I am glad that she is here. Ms. Penn, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you could briefly introduce yourself and provide relevant updates. Following, we will immediately turn to MPD.
Thank you so very much, Councilman. First of all, I want to apologize for the noise in the back, but I'm not at home, but I was determined to be on this meeting today, whatever the circumstances were. And good evening to everybody, to the Councilman Zachary Parker, his illustrious corps of officers and staff, other panelists and guests here today. Good afternoon. I am the chair of the 5th District Citizens Advisory Council that has been in existence for years, and it has been a pleasure. I'm going to give you a little background of what the Citizen Advisory Council does and represents for and with the Metropolitan Police Department. The Citizens Advisory Council is an advisory panel that provides the district commander with information on the public safety problems and police services. The council collaborates with local residents, community leaders, organizations to create a caring and safety strong environment. As we know, we all want to live in an environment that is conducive to safety and the raising of our children. What are some of the functions of the 5DCAC? Community growth. The council actively contributes to community activities of all age levels: seniors, children, middle class, upper class, whomever. We do not discriminate. That also includes the homeless, as well as people that's suffering from other illness. The Citizens Advisory Council is here for them. The community connects, it fosters connections among residents, law enforcement, and other stakeholders. The community is responsibility. The 5DCAC promotes community engagement and encourages responsible citizenship. How does it work? Regular CAC meetings are held every 4th Thursday, virtually and or via in person. Why we are doing it that way is that 3 months out of the year, we every 3rd quarter, we have an in-person meeting. As you know, since the pandemic, a lot of our residents do not like coming out. So in order for us to foster an environment where they all can participate, we have both. Every third, every fourth month, there will be an in-person meeting that will take place at the 5th District at 1801 Bladensburg Road Northeast, and information will be forthcoming to let you, giving you all the pertinent information. During these meetings, what the purpose of the meetings and what we are fostering again is public safety. In order for the police to know what they are or not doing that satisfies the community, they need to hear from the community. A lot of times, community have very good suggestions, information that they can share with the police officers that will help them to do their job easier and better. On the flip side, if the police officers are not doing what you think that they should do, they should hear from you so they could get a better understanding of where they are not fulfilling your needs. And as a result, we have that's the atmosphere basically of the police department, to bring about relationships between the citizens and the police department, where when something happens, our citizens don't feel that they can express themselves because they're afraid for their lives. And as we know, with the danger now of what's going on in our neighborhoods, and it's understandable why they will be apprehensive, but as they foster a relationship with our police officers, then they will know they are not your enemy, they are your friend. And this is basically what we do, is to have everyone, we want to bring all of our residents together with MPD so they can get a comfort level, they can learn what's going on. And not only that, we also try to share the different bills and laws that's being given by the council, so that you will know what's going on, what is happening in the law enforcement area. So please, if you can, spread the word, come to 5D. We have a commander that is outstanding. He is there for the people. Not only is he there for the people, he gets out. We have community walks weekly, and I can honestly say, you can rest assured he's going to make at least 3 of those 4 meetings every week, and he is there to help. He's there to serve. We give events throughout the year for the residents to come and to communicate with the police officers, such as we have Community Day for the police officers, awards dinners. We give them holiday season. For the kids, we have activities going on with the 5D outreach department frequently, and for the seniors. So please give us a call or follow us on the 5dcac.org webpage, and we are more than happy to oblige you. My name is Frances Penn, and I can be reached at fspenn@yahoo.com or 202-230-2727 at any time. Please feel free to call me. And thank you, Councilman Parker, for allowing me to talk about the CAC.
Well, thank you, Ms. Penn, for all you do. I want to echo your praises for our commander, Commander Altieri, who continues to set the bar high. I believe he's been a model not only for our ward, but for the city, and I continue to say that. And many people don't see a lot of the work that is happening, but behind the scenes, and the text messages and the calls and the coordination efforts and the checking in. He's just gone over and beyond to really make sure there is a cohesive element in our public safety ecosystem, and I appreciate it. For those that may not be familiar, each of our police districts, and Ward 5 has 3D, 4D, and 5D. They have their own relevant citizens advisory councils. We will follow up in the chat and in our newsletter, providing the contact information for those advisory councils. Ms. Frances Penn is from our 5D advisory council. And I know the Commissioner Lucio, you asked, could we get one started? There is one, Ms. Nina Murphy Martin is head of the 4D advisory council. We'll share her contact. However, she lives in Ward 4. And my guess is a lot of the 4D advisory council conversations are focused on Ward 4. If you are interested in working with us to establish something as a sub branch of that group in Ward 5, I would be happy to do that to just make sure we're concentrating those conversations on the 4D aspect of Ward 5. So we will be sure to follow up on that. And thank you, Commissioner Amin, for dropping Ms. Penn's contact information in the chat. Ms. Penn, Oliver, do we have any questions? I don't think there are any questions, but I hope you'll stick around with us. And again, I just thank you for all you do for our community.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you for having me.
Absolutely. Next, we're going to hear from 5D Lieutenant Stephen Miller, who also has been a great partner with our community. He is stepping in for the commander today, and he's going to share updates on behalf of 5D.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Commander was unable to make it today because he's sick, so I'll try to fill in for him the best I can. Basically, I'll go over the so for the 5th district part of Ward 5, the major challenges we're having are the robberies and carjackings. They're going to both fall under the same category when they're classified. They're up 11% year to date, but since January, they've gone down 34%, but they are up so far this year. Another crime trend that's driving the crime stats in the 5th district is the motor vehicle theft. They are up 7% year to date. We've had 3 homicides that have been indoor homicides. And then the other part of the major challenges is the juvenile crime. We're seeing a lot of the crimes being committed by juveniles. The initiative that the district and the commanders put forth is we have some high concentration zones in Ward 5, Saratoga, Trinidad, the Eckington area, along with the mountain bike trails, Union Market, Brooklyn, Kingman Park, and Maryland Avenue and 21st Street. Daily, those are locations that are filled with overtime. So each day we have like a specialized unit there for high visibility and handle calls for service. Another initiative that the commanders put forth has been the retail and package theft operations. They're using decoy packages for people that are interested to utilize their porch. They put an air tag in a package that it's addressed to the commander. We have our crime suppression unit. They do like little surveillance, and if the package is taken, they make an arrest. We've done that like 4 or 5 times. We've done 3 arrests so far with that. If anybody's interested in that, they can just email the commander and they can they'll get in contact with them. The 5th district has also been doing on a monthly basis a joint traffic operations initiative with Maryland on Eastern Avenue. It's with Mount Rainier, PG County, the 5th district and the 4th district. They do that once a month now, and they do it during the morning rush hour and the evening rush hour, and it's for all traffic violations, pedestrian violations along the Eastern Avenue. What else? The positive things, the ADWs, assault with deadly weapons, they have decreased 65% this year. Homicides are down 17%. Theft from autos are down 16%. And then overall theft, like retail theft, is down 23%. The only one that is up is motor vehicle theft and robberies. And that's all I have. If anybody has any questions for me specific to the 5th district, I'll be more than happy to try to answer them.
Thank you, Lieutenant Miller. We do have a few questions that are coming through in the chat for you. Oliver, I think you're muted.
Got one question from a neighbor. Lately, we've had multiple vehicle break-ins and or car thefts in Woodridge. What is currently being done to address this issue?
All right, so the auto thefts, the major problem that's driving it is the Kias and Hyundais that are being stolen still, and trying to get the constituents. We still have those club auto theft devices at our station that are free to DC residents, that if you have cars registered in DC, you can come pick it up for free. They're juveniles. Most of the crimes are being done by juveniles, and it's hard to catch them in the act. It's just hard to, I mean, the cars reported stolen, they'll be dropped off at other jurisdictions. We'll locate them. The chase policy kind of prohibits that, but they're working with our carjacking task force, trying to put an end to that. But the auto thefts, 80% of the auto thefts are going to be the Kias and Hyundais. Theft from autos, that's just something that's just, if you see suspicious people in your neighborhood, if you see anything out of the ordinary, just call the police and we'll try to come out to that. We did have the stolen auto. I know you spoke about the vehicle that was driving on the sidewalk in reference to a carjacking. There was 3 people in there, a female and 2 males. They were all juveniles. The female was arrested on scene. That was the one that was on the news. You saw the car driving across the sidewalk and almost striking the pedestrian with the dogs. So they arrested the juvenile on scene, and then 2 males. One was arrested in Maryland on a warrant, and the second one was arrested here in the city on a warrant, but it was also involved in an altercation at the Harris Teeter, where another vehicle was stolen, and he was actually shot by the security guard. So that individual has been involved with multiple offenses, theft from autos, carjackings, so that we had 3 arrests with that one recently.
Another question from neighbors is, how is the youth curfew program enforcement working? And if there's any impact at all?
That was in the summertime, they were doing that. Now it's kind of, I mean, in the club zone areas, maybe in the 3rd district, they can speak more to that around U Street corridor, because I know that that was the initiative around the nightclub areas. In the 5th district, we still have a truancy van working for day work. But as for the curfew violators, I don't think we're really having much success in the 5th district with that enforcement on a nightly basis.
Another question that we have is, can we speak on our request for CCTV placements in the neighborhood?
Yes, all those can be forwarded to the commander, is his email address. I know that, and when they first unrolled that, there was only limited numbers that were going, and they were based on crime data, and the districts have limited input on where they can go. But we do have mobile crime cameras, and when the commander can move them to other locations, he does, and he has recently. I know that right now, Rom and Montello, Saratoga, and if they do get a permanent one, we're able to move it to other locations. But if you do have specific information and you just want to send that to the commander, he'll definitely get back to you on reasons why we can or we cannot put a camera in your location.
Yeah, I would just chime in here and ask that neighbors also loop in my office. I am in regular conversation with the commander and the mayor's team. We are expecting more cameras, and as the lieutenant said, those cameras were placed based on crime data. There are many neighborhoods that are requesting cameras, and many that are going without because we simply don't have enough. Although we are expecting more than a dozen more across 5D, we are expecting more in 3D and 4D as well. So just loop our office in as well as MPD, and we'll be sure to share more information as we get more cameras.
Thank you for that, council member. We also have a question from a neighbor in Woodridge. She said that several cars are being broken into at night, not specific to Hyundais or Kias, but what can be done to bring relief and some security to the neighborhood in regards to this?
Yeah, I mean, just taking basic precautions, don't leave any valuables, cords, anything exposed where you can see it. Like, and if your neighborhood is getting hit hard and you think that it's on a regular basis, just shoot us an email with your location and we'll try to get some people out there. I believe she said on the nightly, so midnight tour, we'll get some special attention out to that area. And we can also, if they want to do maybe a community walk or stuff like that to address if the lighting or any other factors that are increasing the thefts and stuff, we'll look into that as well.
And if you see something suspicious, report it. That goes without saying. There's also the anonymous tip line for MPD, which many neighbors have found helpful. It is 50411, where you can text a detailed description of what you're seeing, and then officers will address it as fast as possible. What I will do for the neighbors that ask that question, if you can drop the areas within Woodridge that you are reporting increased break-ins, we can request the commander to dedicate resources in that area. It goes without saying, MPD is stretched. That is not to make an excuse, but it is just an important context. And so while there certainly can be increased presence for a set number of days or hours, the commander is constantly having to move units around the ward to address the numerous concerns. But we want to make sure we support the Woodridge community for sure.
We do have other questions, a few more, maybe two more. One question was in reference to the police pursuit on February 10th, the one that you were speaking about in Eckington. What led up to this pursuit?
It was they had the helicopter Falcon was tracking it. It was the vehicle was either spotted by one of the LPRs or one of the traffic cameras, and it came into our district. And basically we had some officers behind it. We had the helicopter support, and basically they cut it because it was going downtown, and then it just so happened to be that they ended up catching them over there by Eckington, or the one suspect. But usually when a car is reported stolen, or if it's used in the commission of a crime, that tag number, make and model is broadcast to everybody as a lookout in the entire city, and then it's put into the system. So when the tag hits at one of the speed cameras or LPR cameras, we're notified by it. And if that's district to district, it'll pass through other districts. And that's what happened that day. It came from the 1st district and it came into the 5th district. And when it came in there, that's when the officers attempted to stop it. They'll always attempt to stop it, but when they flee, that's when they got to make a determination if they can pursue it. I mean, it's hard to pursue, and you got schools, traffic, rush hour. I mean, it's very rarely you're going to be able to pursue it. And that's what happened. They got behind it, attempted the traffic stop, kept going, and then they were able to stop it a short time later when it recovered the vehicle.
I want to jump in here really quickly regarding the carjacking in the Woodridge areas. Thank you for dropping the streets, Lieutenant. If you can take note, I'm seeing Vista, Elm, Carlton, Chestnut, Monroe in that vicinity. I will again connect with the commander, noting he's not feeling well, but we will still make sure that we get coverage there. I want to also highlight that the legislation that the council is moving seeks to address the consistent problem of carjackings. There is already a mandatory minimum on the books of 7 years for carjacking. What the council did through last year's emergency and the pending legislation is expand pretrial detention for juveniles that are involved in carjacking. That means that a judge, should they determine that juvenile is a risk to our community, can hold them as their pending trial. That is still in place and will move forward with the Secure DC legislation. I want to note, and this is not in an effort to point fingers, that officers can increase coverage. Officers can even arrest juveniles and or adults involved in carjacking if the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Attorney General's Office then release them back onto our streets, which has been something we've seen repeatedly. It creates this revolving door. And so we are endeavoring to address that. I want to be clear-eyed and clear with neighbors where I believe the problem lies. Yes, MPD can do more, and we need to make sure we have more targeted coverage, but we also need to make sure we hold people accountable once they've been detained for carjacking. And that is a persistent problem. I'm happy to talk more with neighbors about that, and what I think is a more long-term solution. But wanted to throw that out there, that we are seeking to address that through the Secure DC legislation.
And just to say one thing, two of the people that were involved in that carjacking, they were ages 12 and 14. So that puts in perspective how young these suspects are. And if you're 14 years old and you've done this multiple times, it's tough to, I mean, what kind of punishment is a 12-year-old going to actually get? A 12-year-old, I mean, they should be in school. It's tough, and they do, and we have made multiple arrests for these carjackings, and like council member said, if they're released back on the street and it's the same person.
We also have we'll do one more question. This is from Commissioner Henderson. He said, how many POCA arrests, and I guess that's the possession of open container of alcohol arrests, have been made in PSA 506 and 507?
All right. So we have, I don't know if you guys are aware, the chief put together the Atlas unit that goes out at night, and we also have the robbery suppression unit. And during the evening tour, and they also have that during the middle of the day as well. Now, they can make anywhere between 8 to 10. Just last week, they probably arrested 12 people over by Starburst Plaza, Bladensburg in Maryland. And then the previous week, they were on North Capitol. They made multiple arrests. And they get these lockups for the minor crimes like that, and they also lead to guns. So they got 2 guns off North Capitol, and they got 1 gun off of Starburst Plaza, and it initiated with possession of open container of alcohol and also public consumption of marijuana. So they are enforcing that as well.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so that would be it for the questions. We weren't able to get to all of them, but we're a little bit pressed for time, so we can move on with MPD 3D with Captain Moore.
We're excited to you, Captain Moore. One last thing I would just say for the Woodbridge neighbors who I know are here in mass, we will request that the robbery suppression unit that has proven to be successful in other parts of the ward, namely Brooklyn last summer, be dedicated in part in Woodbridge to disrupt some of the cycles that it seems like we're seeing there. So I will follow up with the commissioner as well as community members with an update when I receive one. Captain Moore from 3D, we want to thank you. We know you also have your hands full in the southern part of Ward 5 and are looking for the updates that you have to provide with us.
Right, yes. Thank you for having me. Right, just to go over some basic numbers. Ward 5 or 5E, which we have in the third district, the numbers are looking okay, knock on a lot of wood here. What is driving our numbers up are thefts, and our business beat team is very, very proactive. They're doing theft operations once a week where they'll, if they have access to a store's video cameras, they'll start to watch shoplifters and everything like that. They're also going in stores, doing business checks and looking for nefarious products that are being sold. I'll talk about that at the end. But let me go over a couple crimes here real quick that happened in the last 30 days. We had a burglary on January 28th around 7:49 in the morning of 1418 3rd Street Northwest. This was closed by arrest. This was a case where the suspect, sorry about that, the suspect actually got into the house next door. I think it was 1416, got up on the roof. And then once he's on the roof, got on the roof of 1418, got down inside side of that, and then startled the homeowner who was asleep. And the homeowner found him in the hallway, scared him off, and he went running down the street. Officers got on the scene quickly. They got a lookout out, and we were able to locate this individual on 300 block of M Mary Street. And he had some stolen items from the houses on his person. So that was a good closed case there. We had a robbery on February 4th around 11:43 at night at 2nd and W Street. This is a case where a female was walking down the street. She was pushed down by three suspects. She was maced in the face, and her phone and wallet were stolen out of her pockets. This appears to be a possible, pattern, because two of the suspects appear to be female, one male, and they're in a black sedan. And let me talk about this next one first, and then I'll finish up on that one. We had a robbery on February 6th at 11:40 p.m., 1804 First Street, where we had two victims walking home. Two suspects approached from behind. They again pulled up in a black sedan. The driver of this sedan appeared to be a female. So a phone was stolen, among other property. We did recover the phone. We did later recover a black Hyundai Sonata over in 5D, 1900 block of 5th Street Northeast. And it had the victim from the first robbery. It had her ID cards in there. That case is still open, but we do think that this is a pattern involving some females robbing people. We had a burglary on February 20th, about 3:10 in the morning at 101 Rhode Island Avenue. This is the little corner store at First and Rhode Island, 1107. They broke inside and got inside the cash register as well as the ATM machine. This really looks like a pattern with a 7-Eleven robberies, a very professional crew that's going in the 7-Elevens and some other stores. They're using a Halligan bar like fire departments use, and they're going in with special tools, and they're all masked up and everything, and they're going right to these ATM machines, breaking into the ATM machines. So we have our I think it's a citywide detectives looking into that, because this is a pattern citywide, also in Prince George's County. We had a burglary on January 28th, around 7:45 in the. Oh yeah, right. I read that one already. That was the burglary. So yeah, just those four. Let me go on to gun recoveries. We've recovered 46 guns so far this year in the 3rd district. That's quite a few. And we're recovering more and more every day. Curfews. We got about 15 curfew violators, 64 truants, kids who weren't at school. Some of the significant arrests we had a theft from auto arrest on the 22nd of February, a 46 Hanover Place. This is where we caught the suspect red-handed at a Volvo he was removing some items from. We also got a rifle off of a traffic stop on the 20th of February, 1700 block of North Capitol Street. Just a traffic stop. And then in the back seat, the officers see what appears to be a rifle case. And of course, there's a rifle in there, and the individual's not supposed to be transporting a rifle through DC. And we also had 5 drug-related arrests in the ward as well. 2 of which are from the 1400 block of North Capitol there, which we're trying to hit hard. We do have some hotspot overtime. I think the 4th district does too. Basically, we have 6 zones that we created. And, it's based on stats and sounds of gunshots and, violent crime. So two of the zones in the ward that are covered, and this is covered 7 days a week, basically on the evening tour from 3 to 11 p.m. Our zone 5 is basically Florida to U, 3rd to Boer, plus the intersection of 7th and T, which we have a problem with as well. And then zone 6 is going to be N to P, North Capitol to First Street, there along that North Capitol corridor. So basically there's an officer, that's in those areas every evening, shifts 7 days a week. We also we established 2 focus patrol units. These are cars that are basically going around and hitting the hot spots. We divided them up, basically the upper end, lower end, kind of north of Florida, south of Florida. So these cars aren't getting as many calls for service, but they're able to go around to these hot spots and look for guns and drugs and nefarious activity, and respond quickly to these robberies and sounds of gunshots and theft from autos where the suspect might still be on the scene. And let me wrap it up by talking about 1426 North Capitol. That's the Capitol Tobacco and Grocery there. So we've been getting complaints. Of course, this place is right next door to a daycare, and then right in the rear on the other side of the alley is Mundo Verde Public Charter School. And this store is a big draw for lots of the folks that hang out there, right? So I sent the business beat team in there, and out in plain view, they have for sale a whole bunch of packaged synthetic cannabinoids, right? This is what they call K2, or, synthetic marijuana. And it's a very dangerous drug. This, in my opinion, I think is worse than, crack cocaine. Really, it's close to PCP, very dangerous chemical. They spray on some plant material, dry plant material, and then, people smoke it, right? And so, and then the people, when they smoke it, they can often go, kind of berserk, similar to PCP. So this store is selling a ton of it. We got a large amount. And we also got a lot of marijuana, which they don't have a license to sell, and THC products, as well as the flavored tobacco and e-cigarettes, which they're not allowed to sell within 1.5 miles of a school. And they're right next door to a daycare preschool. And then right behind them is a public charter school. So we arrested the clerk. The clerk was no papered, but we are applying for a warrant for the owner of the store, as well as a search warrant. So those warrants are pending. So as soon as those are signed, we'll definitely utilize those. We also notified DLCP. OAG is aware. OAG is going to send a letter to the owner and see what kind of cooperation we can get from that owner. Unfortunately, the owner, so the store on the corner of North Capitol and O Street was closed down. He's now leasing that, and he has reopened that. So that concerns us, because we've gotten guys on the steps in the past there with guns and things. So we're going to be checking on that store to see if he's going to be selling the same kind of stuff in that store. Right, and to back it up, he was fined in the past for selling the e-cigarettes and the flavored tobacco, but as soon as he paid the fine, he just started selling the stuff again. Very brazen. Yeah.
Captain Moore, I really appreciate it. We do have one more guest that I want to make sure we get to in our last few minutes, but I will join you in leaning in with DLCP. I requested a visit from DLCP to those tobacco institutions, as well as
Right.
several other businesses along North Capitol. At the time, they said they did not find any infractions. So I will follow up with you
Okay,
to just raise the profile and the pressure. And I have been pretty transparent that I want to see those businesses gone from North Capitol because I think they are a harm to our community.
yeah,
You have my commitment to follow up on that.
awesome, great.
And so I appreciate the letters, but I also think there's
Yeah.
more we can do to act more urgently on that.
Right. You know, one other thing I wanted to add, just on January 4th, you know, we had officers down there. They saw a guy standing in front of that store, stuff like a hard object into his waistband. They went up to make a stop on him, say, hey, look, we just want to make sure you don't have any guns, you know, because he just said, I just stuffed some weed in my, jacket pocket, but they saw something in his waistband, right? So they go to stop him. He flees. They wrestle on the ground. He gets away. He jumps in somebody's basement. They see him in the basement. They get a gun on him. They saw the gun. They felt the gun, everything like that. Of course, no paper, right? So we call U.S. Attorney's Office and plead and say, look, it's very well written narrative, and they develop reasonable suspicion and everything. So even though they no papered it, they allowed us to do a grand jury original. So we did get an indictment on the grand jury. So, but yeah, Councilmember, just to your, what you were saying about the papering process, it is very, very frustrating on our end.
Absolutely. And I think it's important for neighbors to be aware of the gaps in our system. I will just lift up this one question from a neighbor. Captain Moore gave stats on the youth curfew. Lieutenant Miller said it was only a summer program. Please inform accordingly. What I will say is there were no youth curfew locations in 5D ever identified. As you recall, when this program was rolled out, there were only specified locations. And so, Captain Moore, can you just speak to how youth curfew is being managed in 3D?
Right. So we use basically the same van for truants during the day and curfews at night, and we'll go around and see if we see any juveniles out past midnight, right? And if we do and they flee, we're told not to go after them. We're not using force to tackle them to the ground or anything like that. But if we do get them stopped, we take them to us center. I think it's over in 5D over there on Mount Olivet Road is where we drop them off at. But they are very hard to get because they flee 99% of the time. And once they flee, we aren't chasing after them. So they are very difficult to get.
Well, I want to thank you, Captain, for joining us and for the work of our 3D team. In our last 5 minutes, I want to acknowledge that we did invite the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. I am going to invite you all back for our next call if you would be so kind to join us again. I don't think we're going to do justice to your presentation, but I would invite you to briefly, and maybe 2 to 3 minutes, highlight what your office does, and maybe 1 or 2 headlines of what you're currently working on, if you can share. And then we'll close out and have you join us again. I do want to apologize. Time got away from us. But I think the questioning from community members or of our MPD team was important and shows the pressing nature of the rise in violence. So my apologies. And I would love for you to close us out with what your office does and maybe some headlines about what's next for you all.
Absolutely. So Candace Catalin here, Community Engagement Specialist with the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, and I'm joined with
Megan Marie Fowler Finn, Chief Administrative Officer.
Yes, so thank you for having us, and yes, we will come back. So briefly, what we're doing at our office is we coordinate the public health strategy for gun violence prevention, in ensuring that there is collaboration and there is coordination amongst agencies to implement that strategy. One way we'll do that, and just I'll highlight our mini grant programs. Ms. Suzette, Tom, if you're still on the call, I saw your question. I'm glad they asked the question, but we have over 200, over 150, over 200 partners in the community who are community residents who are doing gun violence prevention work regularly, and they've been doing it before there was a grant and also with the grant, and they sometimes continue to do it without our grant. So yes, it is happening. They are a part of the solution to gun violence in their communities. And while I'm speaking about that, I talked about the 150 grantees. We've at this time $2.8 million in our grant program to ensure that there is community involvement to implement the answer to gun violence. And I was happy to highlight some of those grantees that are in Ward 5 doing this work. Some who are on this call who are actively in the community, and again, always implementing their answers to gun violence. I think it's a good time to briefly talk about maybe the dashboard, because that's something that residents and the council's team can also look at until we return.
Yeah, we'll go through this more in depth next time, but you can find any gun violence data about Ward 5, about your ANC, go in depth in lots of different ways on this dashboard. So I'll be happy to go in depth on that next time.
Awesome. And I just want to tout the work of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. It is, I think, an underappreciated office. And I think you all play a very important role in addressing the rise of gun violence in our area and in our city. And I want to just thank you again for joining us. I am especially grateful for the targeted approach that you all are working to lead on through your grants. As we heard from the CJCC, that is what research tells us makes the difference. It is worth noting in Baltimore up the road, they are for the first time in a long time seeing a decline in violence and homicides, and they are touting the work of targeted gun violence prevention as the reason for that decline. And so, again, just thank you. We don't have time for questions, but we will have you leading on our next call, and I thank you for your grace. For everybody that joined, we will share a recap of this meeting in our weekly newsletter, including the video. For any questions that we were not able to get to today, and I know there were a couple earlier, I think for the 5D team, we will be sure to answer. If you have suggestions or thoughts around who should join in a future call, please let us know as we are working to highlight different aspects of our public safety ecosystem. And it goes without saying, public safety remains top of mind for me and my entire team. So if there's anything we can do to improve safety, or even just the assurance that neighbors have that work is being done to improve safety, please do let us know. So with that, we'll close out this month's call. And again, I want to thank you.
Thank you.